I have fun like messing around with underwriting models, right? At midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., like it's like a puzzle trying to figure out a way to get a deal to work, right? I know you enjoy that feeling too, Adam, having talked about it in the past with you. So that's been a piece of it. Second piece of it, it's been delegating, right? The tasks that I don't like as much, right? And focusing on the tasks that I do like more.
You're asking yourself, why am I doing this?
Smart people would know how to use all these different tools. They start with something small.
You'll never get your entire organization if you don't pull off operations. Don't give up.
It can be as small as that.
I think you guys are going to have our last today.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Delegate That podcast, where we discuss the art and science of delegation, business management, and leadership. I am your host, 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗃𝗃, and today I'm looking forward to having a good chat with my friend, Kartheek Mulpuri. Kartheek, please go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us about your business and what you've got going on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Adam. I've got a couple businesses. One of them, and the one that I'll talk about on this podcast, is a finance and accounting business focused on early and growth stage companies, both venture-backed and non-venture-backed. I started building this business 5 years ago, and it started as a business I was doing on the side while I held full-time roles, and I've been at it now full-time for close to 3 years. So excited to dive into it with you.
Fantastic. I like going from a business on the side to turning that into full-time. How did you kind of transition that? Like, what was it that you saw while you were working full-time in something else that you saw in this that made you go, yeah, this is where I need to actually put the pedal down, not somewhere else?
There's a few things. First piece was figuring out the business model. So the first couple years I was at it, the way that I set up the economic structure, I realized like it was a structure that wasn't scalable, right? So I had the chance to chat with others who were full-time in this business, folks who were friends of mine, and through them learned the economic structure that does work in a business like this. And you know what it is finding ways to build recurring revenue, right? So that way you're not always having to backfill a leaky bucket, right? And part of that involves onboarding and working with the right types of clients, right? Where these are clients you see the potential of a longer term relationship. So that way, more of my time can be spent on delivery and doing a great job for those clients. And I can really build relationships with them over a longer period of time versus, doing tons and tons of BD to backfill, say, project clients, that I work with for a month or two, doing a special project for them and then having to backfill because, boom, they have what they need and they don't need me anymore, right? So that's one piece of it. Second piece of it was, so over time, right, as I was starting to build this business, I was enjoying the W-2 roles I was in less and less. And, my most recent role was at a late stage, hot, B2B startup, right? One that's going to probably be well known by many. And, toward the end of it, right, because it was fully remote, I didn't get to see my team much and they were all on the West Coast. Like the hours were a bit of a mess, right? Where I'd start late, but I'd end work super late as well, right? Hopping on Zooms at, 10, 11 p.m., sometimes midnight and beyond. So I ran into some health issues actually from that. And so that was a wake up call for me, right? That, maybe this doesn't fit me as well as it used to, say pre-COVID. And I've got to give, focusing on the business full-time a chance, right? So, those are the things that drove me to do it.
Do you feel overwhelmed with mundane tasks that eat up your valuable time? It's time to reclaim your schedule and focus on what truly matters. Get your time back with elite remote talent without the time zone hassle. Delegate $10 an hour tasks to focus on your $1,000 an hour tasks. Schedule your free strategy call at 𝗦𝗽𝗆𝗄𝑠.io.
Fantastic. It's I would imagine the health thing was kind of a punch in the gut, and you probably took that into the new business as well. Like, how do I make sure that I'm not putting myself in a position that that's going to be a problem again? So kind of when you started to move over into your now full-time job, your new business, how did you kind of set things up to make sure that you were maintaining the health, the lifestyle that you needed to make sure your lifestyle stayed healthy, and that your business was still going to be able to thrive?
Yeah, so I think it was a stress-driven thing. The health issue that popped up. At least that was the diagnosis from the doctor. So the whole thing of I think it's called psychosomatic symptoms. Like it's a very real thing, and I don't think I realized that right until that incident happened to me. So. For me, as I build, I think stress comes from different things, right? But I think stress, in many cases, at least for me, comes from having to do things that, I don't really want to be doing, and that driving me to feel, burnt out, right? And so that last W2 role I was in, truthfully, I felt burnt out, right, for, several months before I ended up leaving that company. So, and burnout is not necessarily like number of hours worked, right? Because like for me, like these days, like I am oftentimes up until 12. This is midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Getting work done, right? But this is work that I enjoy doing, right? So it doesn't feel like work for me to the extent that it does, or the extent that it did in this W2 role. So I think that's part of it, right? Like getting to work on stuff that, I really enjoy doing, right? My other business is, commercial real estate investing. So I have fun like messing around with underwriting models, right? At midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Like it's like a puzzle trying to figure out a way to get a deal to work, right? I know you enjoy that feeling too, Adam, having talked about it in the past with you. So that's been a piece of it. Second piece of it, and is something that I'm sure like we're going to get into in this conversation, given that's the name of the podcast, but it's been delegating, right? The tasks that I don't like as much, right? And focusing on the tasks that I do like more. So I think that's certainly helped. And third piece is just, like I have flexibility, right? A certain level of flexibility that I didn't have before, right? So sometimes like I'll have a day that's very minimal in terms of getting work done, right? Like say like a Wednesday, like I'm just free like all day that day. So I don't necessarily work, that day, but then I end up making up for it Thursday, Friday, and then sometimes into Saturday and Sunday, right? So for me, like my work style is, I can work 7 days a week if I need to, right? But if the hourly load isn't particularly intense any of those days, that's fine for me, right? And I'm basically building to the same work week on an hours basis that many out there are, right? It's just a different way of doing it, right? And one that's a better fit for me.
Yeah, and I think there's, there's all those different things that folks use, like these quadrants, like what are you good at and you enjoy doing. And when you're doing the things you're good at and you enjoy doing, it tends to be much less stress on your brain because it's just, I enjoy doing this. This works for my brain. I'm able to do all of this. We were talking before the recording that you've kind of built out a good system in your business where you have mostly contractors. Kind of, let's walk through how you started to look at this to say, hey, I'm going to focus on the things I love, that I'm good at, that are good for my calendar. But there's still obviously a bunch of other stuff that needs to get done. Talk to me how you set yourself up so that you can again do the things that you're enjoying.
Yeah, so a couple of things that I really enjoy doing with my business. One is the BD front, right? And for me, the BD front, yeah, I mean, I do send some outbound emails out, right? And that's not the most fun, but it's not the worst thing to do in the world, right? Especially if it's like late at night, you're sending emails to go out the next day at 11 in the morning or something, right? The second piece of BD that I do really enjoy is getting to know investors, getting to know lenders, right? And building those relationships with them to a point where they're sending me opportunities, right? And that's kind of like the holy grail to some extent, right? For fractional folks like myself, where you can build those inbound channels where the deal flow comes to you, right? So the longer I've been in this space, I've gotten to see more and more of that, right? And if I take a look at my client base, I think like only 1 of the 10 has been, one that I've just reached out to completely cold and won, right? Other cases, it's been warm outbound where so-and-so told me like, hey, you should talk to these guys, reach out, feel free to refer me, right? Where it's likely you already get a response. And then a bunch of other cases where the interest just come to me, right, through an investor, a lender, or someone else, right, that I've just met in the startup ecosystem. So that relationship building is fun, and like it takes time as well, right, to build these relationships. It's not a case where you do an intro call with them and then boom, like you're checking in with them 12 months later, right? They'll forget you by then, right? So there's real effort you have to make so that you're the person that they're thinking of. And so for me, sometimes it's, sending deal flow over to them, right? So I might come across a company, whether or not I'm working with them, I'm happy to refer them sometimes to those investors or to those lenders, right? So that, they're thinking of me, right, as things come up on their end. So those are things I enjoy. The other piece I enjoy as well is in delivery, like interfacing with investors, interfacing with management teams, like helping them brainstorm and think their way, through issues, interfacing with, investors as well and other stakeholders. So for example, right, noon today, I get a call from one of my clients, right? He's about to jump on a call with a client or a potential client of his, right, that he's trying to get a big deal done with. And he's, interested in figuring out like where pricing might need to be, right, in order for a relationship with this client to work, right? And that leads to like, hey, where do I need to be in terms of margins for my business longer term, right? So helping to like talk with him through that, right, and my reasoning and approach, and it resonating with him, right, really brings me satisfaction. So yeah, I guess all this to say the relationship and the human pieces of the job, right, are what I really enjoy. The pieces of the job I don't enjoy as much, right? It's the hands-on keyboard, building the financial models, right? In some cases I still do that, right? Especially if it's like a lighter touch piece of the overall engagement. But in a bunch of other cases, I brought in folks to help me with that piece of it, right? So they'll update the models, they'll close the books every month. They'll do the reporting, right? They'll do, the blocking and tackling work that needs to get done, right? That I don't particularly enjoy, right? Isn't like the best use of my time either. And then I've also brought folks in to tackle things that, I can't really do, right? So I'm not a CPA by training. So, for the listeners here, right? CFO types, they come from a couple backgrounds, right? One is the folks who are CPAs, like Big Four types, and they've got to figure out the strategic finance side of things. And then you've got folks like me who come from investment banking, venture capital, right? Have the strategic side of things, and they figure out the operational, piece of the puzzle, right? So that's my background. So, for example, right, a good example of this is quality of earnings reports, right? So a couple of years ago, I was asked by an investor here, right, a venture investor, right, if we did quality of earnings reports for the businesses that they were investing in. I'd never done one before, right, but on my bench of talent and someone who's become like a great partner to me, she had an audit background. Right. So this is something that she used to do in her past. And so I pulled her in. Right. And she's run the show on that front. And, for that firm now, we've done, I think, 8 quality of earnings reports over the past couple of years. And this is a respected firm in the space that they're in. So that's given us an opportunity to have conversations with other firms and maybe try to grow that element of the business, right? And so that's something that I didn't really think about a couple of years ago until, I was asked, hey, do you do that?
That's awesome. And it's one of those things that I guess there's a couple words I could use about it, but to have the humility to go, hey, that's not my strong suit. I need to find somebody that can knock that out of the park, because my strong suit was building this relationship, growing them to the point where you came and asked me that question. So let's find the way to fix this gap and make sure that that we're serving our clients in the best way possible. So as you've kind of built this out, do you find gaps that you have, like this particular one, and then say, all right, let me go find somebody to plug that gap. Let me go find the who to plug that. Or so how do you make sure that you're going about finding the right who to plug into your ecosystem to fix some of the gaps that you may be missing?
That's a great question. So having spent 15 years in the venture ecosystem and in CFO type of circles, right? I have a lot of friends in the space. So the first thing I'll do, right, is ask them like, hey, do you know someone who can tackle XYZ? And through that, I'm usually able to go find someone, right? And the good thing about that approach is oftentimes like when I'm asking for that referral, like I'm asking from someone who I respect, right? And it's case like, as you know, Adam, like A players tend to work with A players and A players refer A players. So that approach has worked for me, right? I think if I were to like really scale this business and try to get from 10 clients to 100 clients, like that approach is not scalable, right? So there are other avenues that I would need to tackle, but yeah, that's the approach that I've taken so far, and it's paid off.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those. I do agree that A players, refer A players and tend to be in those networks. So that's always the best way to do it from what I've seen. So, so what's your goal now as you're continuing to grow this out and you're trying to build the business? Where are you trying to move to?
Yeah, it's a really good question because I'm not totally sure either, right? And it's something that I kind of debate in my head.
Well, let's figure it out together.
Yeah. So I debate, two scenarios in my head, right? Scenario one is executing as is, right? And I basically built this business for cash flow for myself, right? And as I mentioned, I haven't the other business, which is multifamily investing. So the past few years, the way that I've thought about this is I think about this as cash flow and the multifamily investing business as the equity building, right? But it doesn't need to be black and white like that, right? So I've thought about other models with this business where if I do keep it boutique, right, should I try to go get some equity in these startups along with the cash piece, right? And to date, I've optimized for cash. So it's something that I'm starting to think about, like how do I, bring that up with clients, and when do I bring that up with clients in those conversations? And speaking with other fractional CFO types, like I have a friend who's been a fractional CFO for 20 years, right? Over that time period, like he's had some of those equity holdings, some of those stock options actually monetize, right? And it's a nice little bonus to have. And at the end of the day, right, you're adding value, right? Directly adding value because like you're helping with fundraising. And in my case, like given my investor network, I'm making a lot of intros oftentimes for my clients, right? So there's a one-to-one there in terms of like tying it to value. So that's something that I've thought about. Then a second piece that I've thought about is, do I try to like build this for greater scale and try to build equity value in the business itself, right? Do I really try to shoot to get to, a meaningful EBITDA, right? So that I can sell this for, a meaningful dollar price. And so, like just speaking with, friends of mine who've done that, right? Like this is, the thought I've had in my head is like the excess time that I can use to do that. I'd rather spend that time, focusing on doing more real estate deals. But, maybe there are ways, right, to build that business in such a way where, it's not going to be, 90 hours a week, right, focusing on building this fractional CFO firm, right, which I think I wouldn't enjoy if I was focusing, 90 hours a week on it.
Yeah, I think you would lose that quadrant of the things you enjoy and the things you're good at. You're going to have to start doing some other stuff. So have you thought about to grow the business, bringing in other fractional CFOs to spread out, to be able to bring in more clients as opposed to just yourself?
I have, yeah. And the challenge there, right, is that oftentimes when I'm getting introduced for me, right? So the expectation is I'm involved with the project. And sometimes I can socialize bringing someone else in to do heavy lifting. And, there are cases over time, right, where, I was super involved early, right? And then over time, my team member, right, mid-level resource, ends up doing a good chunk of the work, right? So, my time involvement with that client, right, as part of the overall engagement, it's a lot less than it was, say, 6 months, a year before. So, I've seen it work with bringing in other CFOs. I've talked to a bunch. I've actually worked with a couple in the past, right? And these are harder personalities to manage, right? That's the truth of it, right? And many of them, they have their own networks, right? So they're doing their own prospecting, and oftentimes, like it's more difficult to make the hourly or to make the economics work, right? For bringing in another true CFO versus what I can charge in the first place, right? The margins are light, right? So maybe it's something I could do, right? But I'd have to build for real scale and really crush it on the BD front, right? To make that make sense.
That makes sense. I understand that. So I actually want to pivot a tiny bit to the multifamily side of the house, because as you're growing all of this, and you're doing your CPA or your CFO work, and you're trying to push real hard over there, but yet investing into the assets on the multifamily side. How do you have a team set up on the multifamily side as well, so that that's more of now your side job, and how does that fit into the structure of what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I was really fortunate to find my partner 5 years ago, and our skill sets and values complement each other really well. And just from a personality standpoint, he's good at some of the things I'm not good at, right? And I'm good at some of the things that he's not good at there, right? So, technically, I focus on the acquisitions piece of the house, right? Acquisitions and dispositions, and he's focused on the asset management, right? But we do lean into each other's areas, right? As you know, it's hard to go close a syndication all by yourself, right? And
for sure, yes.
He's been great. He's brought great value on that front, right? And then on the asset management piece of the house, right? Like especially onboarding new assets, I'm really involved on that front. Just like make sure we get off to a smooth start. And I'm really interested in the top line piece of where we're getting to, right? So if we're having top line issues, like with assets, like that's where I'll tend to lean in more, right? My partner is excellent at the asset management and CapEx pieces of the house, right? So that's how we've split it up. He comes from the military, as you do, right? So I think he understands systems and processes and delegating naturally, just having spent, so much time, in the military. So, he's actually brought on folks, to help him with the asset management, right? So he's brought on someone who's, excellent. She's a fractional resource, who's excellent at, building investor reporting, holding the investor's hand if they have a question through an investor portal, answering ad hoc questions, taking notes and summarizing to-dos from our meetings with our property managers, preparing the financial reporting, on the assets themselves. So, yeah, and that's helped to give us the ability to do more, on our end. So, so I think that's a space, like if we really commit ourselves, like we could probably delegate more and more, right? Like at the end of the day, like maybe we could do more on the acquisitions end if I brought on someone, right? Like an analyst, who can underwrite, deals, at least like do first pass. But that's, I think, where I can bring real value. So, I have the ability, just like having spent like 15 years like with financial modeling, right? And coming from banking and coming from, venture capital investing and stuff that I've done, to really try to find efficiencies, right? And I just have market knowledge, right? Just having, operated in certain markets for 5 years, where I know where certain rents are going to get to, certain expenses should be, right, that I can apply. And, with the acquisitions process, the strategy that we've taken is we do a ton of homework, right, for an asset that we're interested in. And so we'll actually go and call insurance agents up. We'll call vendors up to see like what they would quote us, and we'll bake that into pro forma so that we can pay a higher price based off of numbers that we're confident in. right? And so, the deal a year approach, me focusing on acquisitions, it's work for that, right? But if we do want to take on more, then I do need to bring on help, and I could probably bring on help with, looking for new investors to work with, right? Because that's the limiting factor for us, right? Because we do 506Bs, which some of your investors may be familiar with, where you have a pre-existing relationship with all the investors you bring into an opportunity, right? Maybe we can do 506Cs in the future, right? If our investor list gets long enough. So some of the things that I think about, right? And at the end of the day, right, I am pretty active, with these two businesses. So yeah, there are certainly opportunities to just delegate more in general.
Well, I think you said a few important things that I hope people heard through all of that, though, is, you talked about the things that you were very good at and that you enjoy. And those are the things that you've harped on a few times as we've bounced around. And every time we got to something that you didn't enjoy, you told me about a person who was doing those things that is helping your business function well. And that in and of itself is what we should all be looking for. A lot of people try to think of delegation as get me to the point where I'm doing nothing.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily if you're doing nothing, you probably don't have a clue what your business is doing anyways, right? So you got to be doing something, right?
Exactly.
But you've gotten yourself to a point where you are doing the things that at the moment only you can do. And if you find somebody that can do one of those things better than you, or you're no longer the person that's the only one that can do it. All right, now maybe we delegate it out again. But you're filling the gaps that are needed to be filled. You're finding the right people. You're finding the right who's instead of trying to figure out how to get it done. You put a who in there. And I think it sounds like you've been setting it up pretty well. So it's been good to kind of hear how that's going.
And just real quick, something that you alluded to that I think is a really good point, right? Because I hear that a lot, let me delegate my way entirely out of the business, so I'm spending 0 hours on it. I think that's a bad idea in many cases, right? Because thing is, business environments are shifting, right? New tools come along. So even sometimes, for me, right, I alluded to it earlier, I do some of my own financial modeling, right? And I do some of my own grunt work, right? Just so that my skills stay sharp. For what I'm doing, right, there are going to be AI tools, right? There are AI tools that are, coming out, right? So, part of what I do as well, right? There might not be an immediate, client application, but I have to stay abreast of these things, right? So I take demos from time to time with these vendors to see, what they have, what they're working on, right? Because I might not necessarily work with that vendor immediately, right? But just so that I see what's on the horizon, right? That I can pivot my business as needed.
For sure. And it's, if somebody's caught sleeping because they decided they didn't want to be in the business anymore and delegated everything, well, yeah, you're going to be in a world of hurt when your business starts really hurting. So paying attention to what's coming out, where things are going, having a good pulse on what's actually happening, have those good pulse meetings and your good L10s, understanding what's happening with your managers and everything. Completely agree with you there. Well, Kartheek, it's been awesome having you on here. I really appreciate getting to understand kind of what you have going on, how you've built the systems and processes in there. I'm sure that the folks listening have appreciated as well. If somebody's hearing you, maybe they want to reach out and learn a little bit more about your CFO services or even potentially your investing. What's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
Yeah, so my website is 𝗺𝗶𝗀𝗀𝗃.com. And, the website for the investing is sixthsenseequity.com. So they can reach out to me through that, or they can reach out to me over email. I'll give it out. It's first name Kartheek at firstname.com. So Kartheek at KartheekMulpuri.com.
Very awesome. Well, Kartheek, like I said, much appreciated having you on. Great to catch up with you again. It's been a little too long since we've been able to chat. But everybody listening, if you think Kartheek can help you out in any way, please reach out to him. He and I have gone back and forth on spreadsheet stuff. It's not very often you hear somebody say, I'm toggling around on the spreadsheet at 1 o'clock in the morning, but you heard Kartheek say that today. So, obviously that brain that you've had for 15 years inside of the finance world has been put to good use. So please reach out to Kartheek if there's anything he can do to serve or support you. We thank everybody for listening. Thank you again, Kartheek, for jumping on, and we will see everybody on the next show.
Thanks, Adam.